Before we actually get to the coding, I just want to tell you guys the kind of purpose of these lessons and how they're meant to teach you. So these lessons, they're not going to tell you everything you need to know about Python. They're just going to give you the basics, and I'm going to encourage you guys to go out and just code your own projects because that's how I learned it. In my opinion, it's a really good way to learn how to program. So now let's get to these data types. So there's three that they're very basic, but they're very important in Python, and a lot of more complex like data types, they're based on these. So the first one, it's strings. The second is integers, and the third is booleans. So the first one, a string, it's a string of characters, so it's just text. So you see right here, hello world. This is a string because one, it's in quotation marks, and two, it's just made up of 11 characters here. You have the 5 in hello, this space, and the 5 in world. And the characters that you can use in strings, they aren't just limited to like letters. So I can have h3 and ampersand close parentheses y, and this is still a string. It'll still print just fine. Yeah, it just prints fine. The second data type, it's an integer, which it's just a whole number. It can be positive or negative. So something like -20 right here. This would be an integer. 9 would also be an integer. Just important thing to know about this is integers cannot be decimal numbers. We have another data type for decimal numbers that I'll get to in a later lesson. And you can perform a bunch of mathematical operations with these integers. They work just like actual numbers work. And the third data type, it's called a boolean. And a boolean is just a true or false value. So like, is it raining? Are you a boy or a girl? You can say boy true or boy false. They're just true or false. So now that we have these data types, we can store them in what's called variables in Python. So I'm going to have str1 equals hello int1. So str stands for string, int stands for integer, int1 equals 15, bool1, and bool1 is just short for boolean, true. So variables, they just store data. So in math, they usually store like numbers. In Python, they can store numbers, they can store booleans, they can store strings, they can store lists, they can store a lot of things. But just the basis of them is they just store data. And see, we can reference this data in other parts of the code. So when we first like make a variable, it's called defining it. So right here, I define the str1 variable, I define the int1 variable, and I define the bool variable. So now I can print these. So I can print str1, I can print int1, and I could print bool1. And when I run this, you see it prints out hello, it prints out 15, and it prints out true. So if you notice in here, in my print statements, I didn't actually write hello, 15, and true. I just typed in the variable, and the variable is these. So another thing you should take from this little example right here is the order that that things were printed. So notice that hello was printed first, 15 was printed second, and true was printed third. And in my print statements, I printed the string first, the integer second, and the boolean third. So in Python, your code, it runs from top to bottom just like you would read a normal book. Additionally, you should also pay attention to what we call the syntax in here. And the syntax, it's just the rules that you follow when you code. So for example, you need to define variables with one equal sign. That's syntax. You need to pef strings inside of quotation marks. That's the syntax of a string. The Boolean values need to have a capital letter. So if I type in true with a lowercase t, you see I get an error. But if I switch back to an uppercase t, it's all good. And same with the strings. If I take away the quotation mark right here, I get an error. So that was some of the data types right there. Next we'll go in depth on like what we can actually do with these, what calculations we can perform.